My name is Sophia Lane. I'm 33, and I've spent most of my adult life building a life on my own terms. I run a small bakery in the city, the kind of place where people line up for hours on Saturday mornings just to get a loaf of bread they can't find anywhere else. I love what I do, and for years it kept me steady, even when my family tried to make me feel unsteady. Last Thanksgiving, I realized exactly how much they had underestimated me. My parents, Greg and Helen Lane, had insisted we celebrate at my apartment, claiming it would be cozy and intimate. My younger brother, Liam, tagged along, as usual, pretending to be helpful but mostly just observing like a critic in the corner. I had decorated the living room with handmade garlands and scented candles, laid out the table with the dishes I'd prepared, and tried to ignore the familiar coil of anxiety that tightened whenever my parents visited. Dinner began politely enough, but I could feel the undercurrent of judgment as soon as Greg sat down. "You always go overboard," he muttered, looking at the centerpiece I had spent an hour arranging. "Why can't you just keep it simple?" Helen nodded in agreement, though her smile was strained, and Liam smirked like he had a secret advantage. I forced myself to smile and carry on, telling myself that people sometimes spoke without thinking. Then came the toast, and I should have known. Greg stood, tapped his glass, and looked around the room like a king surveying his court. "I think it's time everyone understood something," he began, slow and deliberate. "Sophia has been living in a bubble, thinking she's independent, but we've been the ones holding everything together. We've helped her with bills, loans, and emergencies she didn't even tell anyone about." I felt my stomach drop. I could see the eyes of my friends, unfamiliar with our family dynamics, widening in discomfort. My father's tone wasn't proud, it was theatrical, accusatory, designed to make me small, and it worked for everyone else in the room, except me. I took a deep breath and said one word. "Seriously?" Greg's jaw tightened. "Yes, seriously. You've leaned on us too long. Maybe it's time you understood what it's like to handle life without someone always bailing you out." For a moment, I felt the old familiar rage, the rage of years spent hiding my contributions while they took credit, of years spent protecting them from the truth so they could maintain their image. But this time, something had shifted. I no longer felt the need to absorb the shame. "Let me be clear," I said, my voice steady. "Every loan you think you gave me, every favor you claim I couldn't manage on my own, I repaid quietly. I funded my own apartment, my bakery, and my life. Every single time you think I needed you more than I did, I was managing things exactly the way I needed to. What you call dependency was never dependency, it was responsibility." Helen tried to interrupt. I shook my head. "No. I've spent years protecting your pride while sacrificing my own peace. I am not doing that anymore. And I won't let you humiliate me in front of anyone, least of all my friends and my fiancé, Ryan." The room went silent. Liam's smirk faltered, and I could see the recognition in his eyes. For the first time, he realized I wasn't the naive little sister who would stay quiet forever. I stood up, collected the children's coats, my nieces were visiting for the holiday, and told them, "We're leaving. If anyone wants to lecture me about my life, they can do it somewhere else. I'm not staying for the performance." As we walked to the car, I felt the familiar shake of adrenaline, but it was mixed with clarity. For years, I had tried to make their lies about me fit into my reality, to protect them from their own lack of accountability. I realized now that was never my responsibility. The next morning, I checked my phone and saw the fallout. Dozens of missed calls from Helen, texts from Liam attempting to justify their behavior, and a few distant relatives forwarding screenshots of the toast. Helen had already taken to social media, spinning the story in her favor, portraying me as ungrateful and bitter. I brewed a cup of coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my records. Every time I had secretly covered an overdue bill for them, every emergency they had helped me with, I had documented. It wasn't for revenge, it was for proof. Proof that the narrative they told the world about me being helpless was a lie. One comment was all it took. I posted calmly under Helen's update. Interesting definition of dependency. For clarity, I have paid your property taxes, Liam's rent shortfall, and covered multiple emergency repairs over the last 2 years. If this is what you call supporting someone, perhaps honesty is a better measure. The reaction was immediate. Cousins began asking questions. Aunt Joanne, one of the few family members who had ever been neutral, called to confirm the numbers. Once the truth was out, the stories Helen and Greg had spun for years began to unravel. Messages stopped being about me being ungrateful and turned into inquiries about what I had actually done. Weeks passed. I built boundaries. I stopped covering bills, stopped taking calls about their emergencies, stopped pretending their control didn't hurt. And slowly, the family shifted. They realized they no longer had the safety net of my silence. Liam stopped asking for favors he assumed I would handle. Helen's social media quieted, empty without her usual audience to perform for. Greg's pride suffered quietly, but at least now it no longer dictated my actions. Then came the real test. One rainy March morning, I got a call from the hospital that Greg had collapsed at home. A mild heart attack, nothing fatal, but enough to warrant serious observation. They asked for my contact because I was listed as the next of kin. My first instinct was to hang up. My second was to call Aunt Joanne for advice. By the time I arrived, Greg was stable but still weak. Helen looked frantic. Liam hovered in the doorway, and I realized something I had known for years. Showing up out of fear of consequences is not the same as showing up for love. I stayed only long enough to ensure my father's immediate medical needs were met, then left. I didn't apologize, I didn't forgive, I didn't pretend the past few decades of manipulation and control hadn't happened. I simply walked away, my children and my life intact, my boundaries respected. Months later, my bakery thrived, my relationships were healthier, and for the first time, I felt what I'd spent my life craving, peace built on truth, not performance. And I realized the most powerful lesson. Sometimes courage isn't in confrontation. Sometimes it's simply walking away and refusing to be used again.